Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight we are presenting live from the UT Dallas campus. This is Channel 5 News, and breaking news, executive presence is extremely important. Tonight we're going to be covering a story that goes into 5 specific reasons executive presence has an impact on yourself, your career, and the people around you. Tonight's agenda for our story will first start with an introduction. We'll then go through those 5 points, do a quick video, an activity, a summary, and then questions and answers. The 5 points of our story tonight, which is breaking news, is first, how you act. The second is how you speak. The third portion of our story is how you dress. The fourth is the way we communicate through gestures. And the fifth is how we present the areas around us in order to exude executive presence. The first newscaster tonight is Sue, and she will be discussing with you how you act.
Thank you, Dakota. Okay, so we're on channel 1. Sorry. Okay, so 67% of executive presence is how you act or gravitas. 28% of it is how you speak or communication. And 5% is your presentation or how you look. On channel 1, we're covering 3 key factors of how you act. Our feature story will cover authenticity, confidence, and poise. So have you ever thought someone you were dealing with personally or professionally was fake? Okay, what gave you that impression?
This was a few classes back. I thought we worked well in a group, but when the feedback was given, it wasn't what I expected the feedback to be.
So were you given different feedback other than, okay, got it. Okay, so our first channel, again, we're talking about authenticity. And the fake news about authenticity is that it is not fake. So when you're authentic, you're a genuine person. And executive presence, being genuine, is a big part of it. It's not counterfeit, it's original, and it's trustworthy. So this is the differences in authenticity. Have you guys heard of Elizabeth Holmes, the CEO of Theranos? Okay. Can you tell me what she's all about?
I've only heard of her. I can't really tell you what she's about. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
I was just because I just watched the documentary on HBO, and I know she created this company, Theranos, and apparently they could like diagnose all these things with just a single drop of blood, a really small canister, and the product wasn't working. She hid it. They were using other devices or things like that, and misleading investors.
Exactly. So let me give you a little bit more information about Elizabeth Holmes. She founded Theranos in 2003. She had a knack for getting powerful men, like Henry Kissinger. He's the former Secretary of State. She also got James Mathis. He's the former Defense Secretary. And she also got George Shultz, another former Secretary of State, to be on her team. They were sitting on her board of directors at Theranos. She misled investors to the tune of $470 million. At one point, she was the youngest self-made woman billionaire in America. She was valuated at $4.5 billion. But when Theranos was uncovered, that everything that she presented to the public was fake, her valuation went from $4.5 billion down to 0. So right now, she's currently on her way to court. Steve Jobs is the real news. She also emulated him. She wore a black turtleneck, jeans. She spoke with a very low timbre. So she emulated someone who is the real deal. You want to do that in a sense when you find someone in your life that has clear and strong executive presence. It's not that you want to mock them or imitate them, but sometimes you need to look at what they do and compare it to yourself and maybe and maybe fix that. But she totally took who he was and tried to present herself as Steve Jobs. Next, we're going to look at confidence and composure. The fake news about confidence and composure is that it's excitable and infused with doubt, dependent, and it blames others for mistakes. But the real news about confidence and composure is about being level-headed, decisiveness, and knowing how to make decisions with certainty and execute seamlessly. Nelson Mandela, the leader of the movement in South Africa to end apartheid in South Africa, was released from prison February 11th, 1990. He spent 27 years in prison. In 1994, South Africa held its first free elections. During the debates, Mandela was clearly defeated. Instead of being defeated, with boldness and confidence, Mandela walked over to the clerk, shook his hand, and said, "We are brothers of Africa." This was a clear demonstration of confidence. Those with strong executive presence have the ability to control emotions, and also they sense emotions in others. Let's move on to poise. What's fake about it? It's not about agitation, imbalance, or insensitivity. The real news about it is about calmness, self-assurance, and sensitivity. When we think about poise, we may think about grace, balance, or control, but it also means handling pressure appropriately. According to the CIT research group, 262 senior executives surveyed said, cool under fire is the #1 attribute of executive leadership. Now let's look at an example of a leader that almost destroyed a company. This is Tony Hayward. He was the CEO of British Petroleum. In 2010, we had the worst marine-borne accident in the United States, and that was the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. Instead of taking responsibility for it, he was interviewed, and he looked square in the camera and said, "I want my life back." Now keep in mind, 11 people lost their lives. He also said it did not have an impact on the environment. Soon after, apology after apology came forth, but he had already rang the bell. It was too late. Bob Dudley stepped in, and he took over VP. And he was interviewed, and he looked square in the camera, and he said, "I take full responsibility for what we've done, and we're going to fix this." He went and talked to those families. He knew that it had a major impact on the environment, and he took ownership and responsibility. So now we're going to move to Namita, who's going to walk us through the activity.
So our activity is actually in 2 parts. So right now we're going to do part 1. So in the packet that we gave you, there should be a worksheet, and we'll give you about 5 minutes to do this, but you should answer questions 1 through 10 on your own. But if you have any questions, we'll be walking around. You should totally ask us.
And be honest. I mean, you're looking at this, so just be honest.
It's basically a self-evaluation to kind of see what you need to work on and where you need to improve. So, yeah, be honest.
see a couple people still working a little bit, so we'll give you a few more minutes.
If you have any questions, raise your hand.
See a few people heads down. Are we finished? Yeah?
Does anyone need more time at all? No.
So we are going to come back to the activity a little later, but what we'd like to ask you, were there any questions on the self-survey that kind of stuck out to you? That maybe made you think a little bit before you scored yourself? Yeah?
The storytelling one for sure.
Yeah.
I know that's one of my weaknesses. I don't really utilize that, and I feel like I should.
Yeah.
She said she should utilize the storytelling one more, which I also can.
I can relate to that as well. It's difficult, but it's so important to share with stories because people are more likely to relate to them. So that's also a part of it.
Oh, so like number one, the first question, like you have a strong positive influence on my team, you really don't know how others view you. So that was hard for me to answer. So like, that was very hard for me to answer. I don't know how people view me here or where I work or
So
just generally.
basically he said he doesn't know how other people necessarily view him, so it was hard for him to answer question one. But in our second part of the activity, it's a little bit more interactive, and you'll be able to work with your group and get some feedback on them, with them, and you'll be able to kind of see what they think of you. So it'll be easier for you to answer that question. So hang tight.
Step one was introspection, and step two is reflection. And we'll get to that in a moment. All right, thank you for watching through the commercial. We're back, and we're live. Channel 2, how you speak. What I'd like to ask the audience very quickly for you, those of you at home, how does the way we say things have an impact on how our message is communicated? Does anyone have any thoughts about that? Yeah?
You're saying you suck compared to you need to improve in a certain way. That's definitely what, if you say you suck, then you're saying the person's reaction may be negative compared to if you say, hey, you need to improve X, Y, or Z.
Absolutely, absolutely. So what he's mentioning is if someone has a negative message, they're going to be perceived as someone who is a negative person. Yet if they say that negative statement in a more positive way, I suck versus I have an opportunity to improve, they're going to be perceived as much more positive. And that's a phenomenal point. Now, the way we speak, there's three fake things that I'd like to begin discussing with you guys. The number one we've seen fairly frequently throughout college is when you trail off at the end of your sentences. If you're not firmly ending each and every sentence, there's a few impacts that it's going to have on the audience. You'll lose credibility because the audience won't think that you believe in what you're saying. You'll also take away from your message by not allowing the audience to hear the full wording of it. The second thing is speaking too quietly. When we speak too quietly, we don't have enough volume to reach all members of the audience. And this is something that you have to adjust and really test depending on the size of room you're in and also the amount of people you're talking to. The last thing that we see as fake news is people rambling on and on throughout a presentation or a discussion or a meeting without actually taking the time in between statements for your audience to think about them, maybe interpret them, or for yourself to begin thinking about the next thing you're going to say. When we're rambling on and on, we often never have the chance to think about the next clear statement that's going to come out of our mouth, and it can lead you down a bad road for your executive presence. Now, the three real news statements that I'd like to cover with you guys tonight is that the first one is you need to emphasize the most important parts of your sentences. Now, by doing this, you'll demonstrate to the audience that just because you're speaking grammatically incorrect, there are more important portions to sentences than there are. If you have something that's quite shocking that you want to say, but you need to give context beforehand, you may want to emphasize the words towards the end of your sentence, opposed to the whole entire thing or none at all. This adds value to the way you speak because people will perceive the information you're giving them in a different light rather than being blank. The next thing that we'd like to demonstrate within speaking in executive presence is that you need to speak clearly, firmly, and loudly. There's many impacts this will have on your executive presence, specifically being heard well, being taken seriously, and also being understood by the audience. The last thing that you want to consider as real news within your speech and executive presence is that you need to take time between the things you're saying. This goes hand in hand with rambling. If we speak too quickly and we don't allow the statement to sit, the audience feels overwhelmed, or your friends or your family or your coworkers feel overwhelmed by how much information you're telling them quickly. Use your silence productively. There's two examples I'd like to discuss with you guys about how people have misused speech and how it's impacted their executive presence. The first example is Ronald Reagan's Iran-Contra speech. This speech was conducted almost off of the cuff. It didn't have many editors poring over it and making sure that he had the exact wording that he wanted to say. He didn't get very much time to practice it, and it was in response to a pretty dramatic situation. During this speech, because he didn't have any formal preparation, he was rambling all over the place, there were errors throughout it, and he wasn't emphasizing the correct portions of his statements. The audience could feel it at home, and everyone understood two things. One, this obviously wasn't well prepared, and two, this is a very difficult situation that Ronald Reagan isn't taking seriously enough. The next thing I'd like to demonstrate is one of the most famous speeches of our century, the previous century. Now, Martin Luther King is an idol when it comes to public speaking. He emphasized the most important parts of his sentences. He paused between statements. He reused certain language that was going to resonate with his audience. He spoke firmly, clearly, and loudly to an audience of thousands of people. And he believed in what he was saying. He was well prepared. Now, Martin Luther King is a demonstration not only of how you use speech within executive presence, but also what newscaster Sue spoke about, how you act demonstrates executive presence, and then lastly, how you dress demonstrates executive presence. You can see Martin Luther King here wearing a suit with his fist raised in the air, speaking to thousands of people. The next person that's going to speak tonight is Namita, and she'll be going over how you dress.
Thank you. So thanks for tuning in to Channel 3, where we will talk about how you look. And so really quickly, I wanted to ask a question. If anyone has had a wardrobe malfunction at an important event, would you like to share?
Yes, I had an interview for a Chase Bank, and when this shirt I picked out had a bunch of actually stains on it, and I was like, I had to literally go to a store and pick up a brand new one, and I had to wear it straight to the interview.
Yeah, so that's not fun. I actually have one. I was walking to class. I was walking through the Chess Plaza here at UTD. I was wearing a blouse that instead of buttoned up all the way in the front, buttoned up all the way in the back. It was kind of strange, but I was running late, so I guess I didn't check to see if all my buttons were fastened well enough, and it was a super windy day. So a bunch of my buttons came undone, and I could feel my blouse coming over my shoulder. And so if you were in Chess Plaza that day, you got a show, and you're welcome. No, I'm just kidding. It was actually really embarrassing. So thankfully, I wasn't at a job interview or a really important event, because that could have been really bad. So we're going to talk about how you look and how that relates to your executive presence. So first, we're going to go over some fake news, which is things you should not do or don't. And the first one is wear excessive jewelry. And this also includes makeup. So it's really important that you wear jewelry that complements your outfit and the way you look, and it isn't necessarily a statement piece, because you want yourself to be the statement, or you want your presentation to be the statement. You don't necessarily want people to be looking at the color of your eyeshadow or the necklace you're wearing. You can wear small jewelry pieces, of course, like stud earrings or small necklaces that add a little bit of little extra to your outfit, but nothing that stands out like crazy. Second is you don't want to forget to groom any hair. So this includes your head hair, your facial hair, and your body hair. So if you're a girl with really long hair, it's really important that you don't just go to the office with a bed head. So make sure you take the time to comb it out, style it, do whatever you need to do, but make sure it's out of your face so that people can see you when you speak, and you want to make sure it's not distracting. For men, in terms of facial hair, depending on where you work, company to company, the rules can be different, but you always want to make sure it's groomed. So don't just get out of bed without shaving, because it will look really messy and people will think that you don't have what it takes to have the right executive presence. And thirdly, you don't want to wear professional dress regardless of the company culture. So a lot of people think that it's always okay to walk in a suit. This isn't necessarily okay. If you work at a place where casual dress is the attire, if you work at a startup where they don't want you walking around in ties and they want you in shorts and flip-flops, then that's what you have to do. Otherwise you're going to stick out and people are going to think you're weird. You want to be part of the company culture and part of the team. So now we're going to talk about some real news, which are some things you should keep in mind based on how you look. And so the first one is, when in doubt, dress professional. So if there's an event you have to go to and you don't know the attire, and there's no way you can find out what the attire is, you don't know anyone else who's going and you can't ask them, then when in doubt, you should dress professionally, because it's much better that you dress professional than showing up to a professional event in sweats and a t-shirt. So when in doubt, dress professional. Secondly, you want to dress in neutral colors. So obviously not every single part of your outfit should be a neutral color, but if you're dressing professionally, then the main part of your outfit should be neutral. So this is whites, blacks, grays, navy blues. So your jacket or the slacks that you're wearing, the pants that you're wearing should be in neutral colors, and then you can add a pop of color based on the blouse that you're wearing underneath, or your tie, or even a small piece of jewelry, just again so your outfit looks a little bit fresh. But you don't want your colors to completely distract from your image, which is why we say keep it pretty much neutral. And lastly, you should know the difference between business casual and business professional. This is a question that I've had a lot in my college career, and I know a lot of other people do too. They don't necessarily know the difference, so we're actually going to go into that in the next slide and talk about the exact differences so you know what to expect. So business casual versus business professional. First we'll talk about business professional. Like I said, it's really important to keep your hair groomed, any facial hair, any jewelry. This actually goes for both, business casual as well. But with the professional, you want to make sure that you're wearing some kind of jacket, so a blazer or a suit, and this should be completely full length. You shouldn't have your arms exposed. If you're a man, you should wear a tie, a bow tie, or the long traditional ones like my coworker here is wearing. You should always wear, if you're a man, full slacks. If you're a woman, full slacks as well. However, you can wear a skirt, but you should make sure that your skirt does not hit above the knee. So it should hit right at the knee, but nothing too much higher. And you should always wear pantyhose or tights underneath it, because you don't want your bare legs showing. As far as shoes are concerned, you should wear dress shoes, heels if you're a woman, but make sure you know how to lock them so you're not tripping around everywhere. And of course, make sure your shoes are tied. You don't want to trip around everywhere. And now we're going to go into business casual. So the colors, you can have a little bit more leeway with what you wear. So you don't necessarily have to dress in all neutral colors. You can have a little bit more of a variety, but then again, don't dress in neon yellows and greens. You can also have your arms exposed. You don't necessarily need to have full-length sleeves. And also for women, you don't need to wear pantyhose necessarily. So you can wear a skirt that, again, does not go above the knees, but you don't have to wear tights underneath. And for men, you can wear a button-up shirt, you don't need a tie, or you could wear a polo. Make sure that's tucked into your long pants. Jeans are not considered business casual, nor are they considered business professional. So these are the main things you need to keep in mind when it comes to business professional and business casual. But make sure, based on the place you're working, you kind of know what they have in mind because it differs from place to place. So now, we're actually going to watch a video, and basically in the video, it's from the sitcom The Office. Who watches it? Yeah, it's really funny, I love it. So basically, it's talking about how in Casual Friday, it's really important you know what to wear and what your company expects from you. You don't want to come in too professional of a Casual Friday attire or too loose of a Casual Friday attire, so take a look.
Prudes. You know, Oscar's allowed to wear sandals, but I'm not allowed to wear open toe shoes. Is that how it goes?
Meredith, your boob is out.
Fine.
Oh.
Damn
Damn it, Meredith, where are your panties?
It's casual day. Happy?
Oh.
Toby.
Toby? No.
Okay, so that was actually a really fun video. It's really funny. And so, of course, we know that a situation like this would not really happen in the office. Everyone pretty much knows not to wear what Meredith is wearing. But it kind of goes to show how it's really important you know what Casual Friday means. You know, does that mean a hoodie in jeans, or does it mean business casual? Because that could also be Casual Friday if your workplace dresses business professional most of the time. So make sure you know the ins and outs of your company so you avoid a situation like this, because that could be really embarrassing. So now, we're going to move on to the activity part 2. So we're going to give you some time to get in your groups and discuss your lowest scores on the self-evaluation. Talk about it. So for those of you who had trouble not knowing what other people think of you, now's the time to get honest and tell other people what you think. Also, if you have any questions, please raise your hand. I'll be walking around.
What do you think the pressure? Looks like this is going to go like on 8 kind of start. I don't want to interrupt them in the middle of it. Because I don't want to interrupt them in the middle of it. But I know that if possible to leave now. Because I don't want to like have to leave like in the middle.
Would it be better to leave when it's at least more less obvious, I guess? Well, I mean, it's up to you. But I wouldn't leave when it's not as obvious. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand.
The most discreet one possible.
Yeah.
Okay, that's up to you, though.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out when would be the most discreet. It's not.
Well, nobody's paying attention now, so.
So this would be a good time.
don't feel that much right to do
Okay, take like 30 more seconds. Does anyone feel like they need more time than 30 seconds? Okay, take 30 seconds.
Okay. What'd you say?
Okay, so we're gonna debrief this. Would anyone like to share their lowest score or just something about the activity? Yes.
So I chose number 4, I'm resilient when pressure builds on the job. I made a 3 on that because I have like college, finals, work, life just like happening, and I'm just like, okay, I'm gonna lay down now. I don't want to deal with it.
Yeah. Which one was that?
Number 4?
So she was talking about number 4. She doesn't think she's resilient when it comes to work pressure because she said life gets in the way, which is so true. Life happens. Yes.
Yeah, so to answer my question, number 1, strong personal positive influence on my team. I'm just really hard on myself, not knowing what others are thinking, and just, you know, I just want to, just overly.
Critical?
Yes, that's
Yes,
the word.
me too.
Yeah, overly critical, make sure I do the right thing at all times, so they assure me I have nothing to worry about.
Yeah, you don't. So, yeah, he thought he was too hard on himself, which I know a lot of us can be. It's really important to take a step back, and that's why sometimes these activities are good, because you hear from other people that they are either just as lost as you are, or that you're not lost at all. So you feel good, you don't feel alone. All right, so I'm gonna move it on to our 3rd newscaster, 4th newscaster, Winton.
So, the key to success on both personal and also professional relationships, whether it's personal or professional, is how you communicate to others, okay? Many think that it might be verbally, but it's more importantly that nonverbal communication cues or body language. So just one quick definition of body language is just the physical behavior and expressions and mannerisms when you communicate to other people, okay? So hand gestures, eye contact, tone of voice, all of that comes into play whenever you're communicating to others, okay? So